Hi, friends. Mr. Rogers here, and I wanted to go over the intro to the Paleozoic era. And so the Paleozoic era, if you take a look right here on the side, goes from the Cambrian, which we've been focusing a lot about this time period the last couple of days, this Cambrian explosion idea. Last week we talked a lot about the pre-Cambrian, but Paleozoic goes from the Cambrian period to the Permian, at the end of the Permian. And so this is the Great Dying here. So this whole section right here is Paleozoic. And this is kind of, I wouldn't say a forgotten section, because that would be an appropriate kind of like way to look at it. But realistically, this is a section of time that doesn't get glorified as much compared to like the Mesozoic, which is dinosaurs, or the Cenozoic, which is the rise of mammals. We don't really talk about the Paleozoic, but it's super important. And a lot of things happened very fast. We're talking every one of these periods being drastically different from each other and giving rise to a completely new, almost dominant species. And it led the way to dinosaurs. And it was super important and super, it's not discussed a lot. So the periods are the Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian, Carboniferous, and Permian. A couple of these you'll notice when we watch, especially like British shows, they say it's slightly different than us, but really you go Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian, Carboniferous, and Permian. The idea here is we're going to start from being very basic animals, a lot of maybe like fish-like animals and invertebrates and arthropods, and we're going to slowly go fish, then to like amphibians, and then we're going to go to reptiles, and then these reptile theropod mammal like creatures in the Permian. So we're going to watch this progression happen in the next couple of weeks when we discuss this. Okay. And our main idea here is each single one of these periods, we're going to pick out 2 or 3 animals as almost key species, key things to know in our evolutionary tree, and what they develop to become the key species going forward. Okay. Now, scientists call this the age of invertebrates and fishes. Not as exciting as dinosaurs, but this was a key development from the fact that we went from being no backbones to having backbones and eventually onto land. This is a drastic change. Okay. So let's go next. So major Paleozoic events, we're going to focus really up front here on the Cambrian explosion. And we have been talking about the Cambrian. But other things, too, is we have jawless fish, we have plants going on land, we have amphibians, we have tropical coral forests, which we'll talk about, reptiles, formation of Pangea, and the Permian mass extinction. All these things are going to be main topics that we talk about. Okay, you can write those down, and we'll come back to almost all of them. These are the main things I want to ask like on our test. It's about these guys right here. Okay. So right off the beginning here, things that really affected the evolution of Paleozoic is formation and breakup of these continents through plate tectonics and our continental drift theory that we learned about. Because they were moving around, we built mountains, and mountains affect weather. They create rain shadows and different things like that. Volcanic activity was a big change here. Climate change, and I'll come back to climate change in a second. Sea level changes are huge. And all these things kind of led to many groups of organisms becoming extinct, but also a lot of things evolving very fast. So whenever there's really a lot of extinctions, there's also going to be a very quick evolution afterwards, because everyone is vying for all the niches that now exist, all these jobs that now exist after everybody dies. One of the things that isn't listed here that you're going to see a lot of is the climate change, is the oxygen level. The oxygen level went up and down in this time period, and at one point it was the highest it's ever been, and that really drastically changed what could live during that era, and we'll talk about why when we get there. So we're going to talk about the Cambrian first. So it's from 540 million to 490, so 50 million years. The Cambrian explosion happened in the first chunk here, but realistically it's a unique time period where life is kind of just flourishing. Okay, we have animal life greatly increasing. We're seeing the first shells. We're seeing the first arthropods that have an external exoskeleton on them. That exoskeleton is this is actually wrong. I'm using someone else's. It's not a protein. It's actually a carbohydrate called chitin. Okay. And modern arthropods are insects and crustaceans. They don't look exactly like what you know as insects and crustaceans this time period, but they don't look far off. Like trilobites are the most famous one. They're not far off from what like a horseshoe crab today looks like. Okay, we'll look at that later this week. We start seeing corals and sponges and things that look a lot like today, and we start getting a lot of coral reefs, and that's going to expand how many jobs exist in especially the water. When it's just deep ocean, there's not a lot of jobs or energy going into those systems, but coral reefs have a lot of energy. It's one of the reasons why coral reefs has so much diversity of life, is because they're shallow, so the sunlight's there, the water, all the nutrients, all the living things. It's a great place to evolve. And so coral reefs evolving is huge. We talked about it in the article, talked a little bit about the video, but the Burgess Shale is a very important fossil record that we have. It's found in the Canadian Rockies. And I already kind of discussed my love for the Canadian Rockies, but this Burgess Shale has some of the greatest fossils of any time period that's preserved. And it's incredible that, I mean, from what I've heard, you can walk around the shale and basically every third rock that you break open, you're going to get a fossil of some kind of living thing from this time period. And that's incredible. That doesn't happen usually in fossil hunting. Usually it takes years and years and years between fossils and fossil digs, but just to fall into them all the time is insane. And this is a picture of the Burgess Shale. Here's some different organisms. So this is a form of a jellyfish here. This is going to be an arthropod. We're going to take a look at what these guys actually kind of looked at in a little bit here. This is a worm-like creature with spikes. Another kind of almost like a worm fish type creature. You kind of see that it has a little bit of a backbone that's going to lead to us eventually in evolution. And this is the classic trilobite. Little basically ocean beetle during this time. And so we have this picture of kind of like an artist rendition of what's going on, what these organisms kind of look like. A lot of arthropod looking things. This is actually even an arthropod, an insect, not a fish. And so we have a lot of sponges, a lot of sea anemones, stuff like that. And we have these insects that are dominating, and we have some fish and some jellyfish and things like that. So trilobites is going to be something we cover a lot, especially towards the end of the week. What makes them so interesting is how many trilobites existed, at least in the fossil record. And trilobites died off. They were probably the most common thing in this time period, most successful living thing. And then something happened, and it's been kind of a mystery. And, why couldn't they get through the Permian extinction? And we don't know, but it lived all the way through the Paleozoic and started in the Cambrian. And it was a very dominant species. It's a very dominant body type in the water. It's armored up top. It's quite flat. It's hard to kill. It can go underneath the sand. There's a lot of successes with trilobites that other animals don't have. So these are some fossils here. And they look like horseshoe crabs today. So if we were normally running this class, like it was a normal school year, we would dissect a horseshoe crab. I've dissected horseshoe crabs probably like 5 or 6 times now in classes. They're quite fascinating little guys. And horseshoe crabs haven't changed much evolutionary-wise since about the dinosaurs, the beginning of the dinosaurs. And they look like trilobites. They have a lot of the similar features. They're actually overgrown, their population. They have to kill off a certain amount because they're very successful in this human era because we created so much algae along the shoreline and different food options for them that they're blowing up numbers, and there's too many of them. And the other interesting thing about them is their blood is blue. It's full of copper instead of iron like ours is, and their blood also has some interesting regenerative functions. And we're always studying their blood. At least 1 or 2 cancer drugs that I know of has actually come from horseshoe crab blood and the looking of the chemicals that exist in them. So that's kind of fascinating. All right, we're going to go. I stop there. We're going to talk about the Milo. I can't even say that. I'm not going to try. We're going to talk about this guy with the video tomorrow. But the main idea here is we have a lot of arthropods, so like insect-like creatures. We have a big flourishing part of life in the Cambrian. And tomorrow we're going to talk about some of these distinct features. So thank you for listening. Thank you for taking down some notes. And I hope you guys have a great day.